All right, this is the follow up, and we are following up today on a number of panel conversations I had on George's Base Chat about diversifying your efforts. My guest today on the follow up is none other but the mighty Dave Boonshoft. Dave, thank you so much for making yourself available, and welcome to the follow up.
Well, George, thanks for having me on your program, and I'm glad to be here.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Same here. Same here. So, for those watching, for those listening, let me give you a little bit of background. Um, in the conversations diversifying your efforts, I had a number of panel guests on who not only hold down full workload as working musicians, but who also branched out into other businesses, into other forms of employment and forms of income. And Dave is a great example of just that. Himself, a bass player in New York City, who has done a number of recordings and who has, played many, many years in the scene of the city, and then branched out and started the company, the amplification company Aguilar. So, Dave, let me open it up to you. Diversifying your efforts. What's the first thing that sort of comes to your mind? Why don't you let us into your story just a little bit?
Sure, sure. Well, let me just say that when I first decided that I would be a professional musician,
Right,
my attitude at the time as a young guy was anybody who had a day job wasn't really doing it.
right,
Uh, but, everything you do has an effect.
right,
There's a cause, there's something happens.
right,
So, uh, by only doing paying gigs, I also missed out on playing a lot of creative music
right,
and being in bands that might have been great musically and who knows, might have actually made money.
right.
So the first thing that I'd like to say is when you get into a narrow viewpoint of what you should be doing
Mhm.
and you treat each day like this is the end of my journey,
Right.
I've arrived here, then it's very hard to expand at all,
That's totally right. Yeah, you're totally correct.
And as a young man, I took that attitude
Mm.
and looked at myself and only thought about what my musical aptitudes were, what
Right,
kind of musician I could be,
right,
instead of what kind of person could I be.
right, right,
So, uh, and the funny thing was that in my life as a musician, I was already using other aptitudes and abilities that I had,
right.
but I refused to recognize them.
Oh, that's so deep. That is so deep. Yeah, yeah,
So, going way back, even before I came to New York, when I was,
right.
you know, 19 and 20, I was always the person who spoke to the agents,
Wow.
booked the bands.
Right,
Uh, I was the person, even as a freelancer down in Florida, I wanted to see the actual contract to make sure that there weren't two contracts.
right, right, right,
So I had the aptitude to think as a business person
right,
and to want to understand how I was working as a cog in the machine.
right,
But I didn't realize it all.
right,
And when I came to New York, uh, and I wanted to do more session work. One of the things I did was try to be a contractor,
right.
but not because I thought that would be a great way to live, being a contractor, but I felt, well, first thing, I'm definitely hiring myself to play the bass.
Fair enough.
And if I go get some clients, you know, hopefully they'll return the favor when they have a gig to pass around.
Yeah, yeah.
Even then, I don't think I thought of myself as doing anything but finding gigs.
Mm.
So, I think that we're all born with a lot of aptitudes, a lot of abilities, whether a very organized mind. I mean, they could be very broad. It doesn't have to be something specific.
Right,
Some people are great organizers.
right,
Some people are great leaders.
right,
And none of these aptitudes are more valuable than the other.
Right.
They're all equal. You have them.
Right.
But I think growing up, people say, okay, I want to be a success, so I'm going to ignore these other aptitudes and focus on one that uh, either has been reinforced by elders, parents,
Right. Right.
society, um, or one where we got some positive feedback because we're afraid of failure.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think that I'm any different than anybody like that. I focused myself and thought that I was ignoring my other abilities, even though I used them all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. They were happening regardless. Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I didn't see it, you know.
Right. Right.
I wanted people to know all I did was play music. But
Right.
really, I booked sessions. I had a production company where uh, I would bring clients in. We would rent the studio time. I'd resell it to the labels
Mm.
at a great profit, you know.
Right.
And
Right.
I just thought, well, all I'm doing is facilitating my bass playing.
Right.
But clearly, I was doing more. So I guess the point of that is uh, to kind of not to see your aptitudes
Right.
and kind of say what kind of person am I, because those are the things I can bring to any situation,
Right.
and to be willing to try something that was new,
Right.
that today is not the end of my journey,
Yeah.
it's just part of it.
Right.
So where can you go from here?
Right.
And so that was kind of my story all along. Um, uh, During the time that I started Aguilar, I also was working with a great writer, Jay Dennis. We started. We were trying to produce R&B records,
Right.
and somebody hired us to do a dance remix for 8 Ball Records. So
Right.
all these early, vinyl labels.
Mm.
All of a sudden, we realized that we could be producers in the dance world, in the dance genre, because it was producer driven.
Right.
So eventually, we had a great production company.
Mm.
Um, we worked. We were able to hire the best musicians that we loved. Catherine Russell, who I'm sure you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Of
sang
course.
sang
Yeah.
on a bunch of our stuff,
Yeah.
and we produced records and eventually had a label deal in conjunction with Virgin Worldwide.
Incredible.
So it was all about being open to. We were failures at producing an individual talent,
Right.
but once we saw that we could produce a certain type of record, it opened the door because we said, well, it's producer driven.
Right.
So now we can hire the best singers.
Yeah.
We can do the best production that we can,
Right.
get paid, and accomplish something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's about looking for the open doors,
Yeah.
and uh, and I think that maybe to some degree, uh, taking a realistic appraisal of where you are in in the pantheon
Right.
of of society.
Right.
I certainly knew I wasn't I was no George Farmer. You know what I'm saying? It's, no, it's just
that's,
you know
that's very
nobody's going to
flattering.
go. The heck with that guy. Get me Dave Boonshoft. That's not going to happen. So uh, you know, so I had at a certain point. I was married. I wanted to have wife. I wanted to be around to see my kids grow,
Right. Right.
and I was doing stuff like going out with the mamas and the papas and stuff like this. So little touring situations,
Yeah.
but the money was very bad.
Mm.
And you think, okay, uh, how often am I waiting for the phone to ring? And
Yeah. Yeah.
how many? I would get a jingle date, but how many? It's not.
Yeah. 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 How many balls can I keep up in the air?
Yeah,
Make this
yeah.
work
So,
somehow.
but I let things affect me. I was working at one studio, and the owner wanted to go in on a Neve console.
Mm.
And in those days, we would just break them up and part them out.
Mm.
We knew the preamps were valuable and the compressors and everything. So we went in on the board and we parted it out, and then we would rent them for studio dates.
Right.
So I don't know what it's like now, but back then you'd go into a studio, there'd be nothing there except the console,
That's
and
incredible.
the engineer would go, "All right," or the owner would go, "What do you want to rent?"
Right.
And you'd say, "Well, I'd like a rack of Neve preamps and some LA2s, LA4s. How about
Yeah. You had to rent every piece of equipment, basically.
absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's incredible. I mean, all of that speaks in volumes to entrepreneurship in reality,
yeah."
you know? And like you touched on a bunch of points right there, not to interrupt you too long, but
No, 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 please.
the idea of sort of realizing your amplitudes are vast, just like you are like a multifaceted being
Right.
in general, right? You have
Yeah.
more than just one interest, you have more than just one possibilities, and you definitely have more than just one things that you're good at, right?
Right. But as we grow up,
Yeah,
we tend to push these things aside
yeah,
because you know I'm not a student of Buddhism by any means,
right,
but I know that one of the fears that we all have is we're afraid of death, illness.
right,
We're afraid of being stupid or
right,
being incompetent.
right.
But most of all, we're afraid of looking incompetent.
Yeah,
So when
yeah.
you think about that, how many aptitudes and possibilities do we cut off
Mm.
um, because of that fear?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's
So
significant. That is
significant.
significant. Yeah,
So I started. I had a company called Boonshoft Vintage Rentals.
right.
And I literally I went over to SIR and I said, "Can I copy your contract?"
Mm.
It was the guy was like, he wasn't offended. I think he was just shocked that I asked him.
Right,
And uh, through Jim Flynn and some of these other companies, Dream Hire,
right,
I would be like the vintage specialist.
right. Of course, of course.
All because we decided to buy this console and part it out. And
Incredible.
so then I was doing some sessions, and as I got to know this gear, we had Telefunken and Mike Prees and all. It was great stuff.
Mm.
I wanted to have a preamp that I could take on my studio dates that had these sounds, but was specifically designed for a bass player,
Right,
and that led to me hooking up with Alex Aguilar,
right,
great engineer, and designing the first product that we had, the DB680.
right,
So it was really a product for me to take to the studios.
right.
And because at that time too, there was all the mid-level studios had MCI consoles and
Yeah,
Harrisons. Not saying anything derogatory, but
right.
we used to love to bypass the mic pre's
Yeah.
and to get a great bass sound. We didn't use the ones that were in the console. But after Alex and I were done, we were, I said, well, this is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe George Farmer would like one someday. You know?
And yes,
so,
I do. This,
so,
I can
so,
back that up. Let me just show this to the audience because that is literally what's sitting next to me. Like,
oh, yeah.
hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're talking. So, but we had no idea, and people in the musical instrument industry said we should. I know who this guy is. He's still in the MI business today.
Mm,
I'm not going to mention his name because it was an innocent comment. But
mm.
he looked at me and said, you should make 12 of these, give them to your friends, and be glad you did it. Leave it alone.
Oh wow.
So,
Well, damn.
but we just kind of followed the journey,
Right.
and
Right.
the things I knew about manufacturing products, owning a business that interacted with the public in that fashion,
Right.
was about double zeros.
Right. Right.
So,
And
but we set
explain
up.
explain what you mean by that. Explain what you mean by double zeros.
Well, it was less than zero. It was more. It
Less than.
was more
Exactly.
negative than anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I had an idea in my head of how it would go,
yeah,
and it was very different.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, but the opportunity of not knowing anything
mm,
in a certain way, I had a vision that was unrealistic,
yeah,
an idea that was unformed, and but there's a certain freedom in that,
yeah.
you know,
Hell yeah,
and
yeah,
I think as musicians, and of course I was my own boss,
yeah,
so I could kind of say, well, this is the way I'm going to do it,
yeah,
and of course I didn't want to fail,
yeah.
but the freedom of being able to say that and say, this is my idea of how I should do this,
Right.
and being able to do that uh,
It's
has
huge.
been a terrific blessing to me.
Yeah, yeah, that is huge. That is huge. You have nobody overlooking your progress. You determine your own
Yeah,
next step. You determine, okay, this is how far I'm gonna go with this. This is where I start. This is where I'm
sure.
gonna be in the middle. This is where I'm gonna be at the
Yeah.
end of a process. You know, whatever the
Well,
endeavor might
you
be.
get to own your successes and own your failures.
Oh yeah, most
So,
definitely.
I don't know that we ever knew what the end of the process was going to be, but um, we went down the path,
Yeah.
and tried to see where it would go. Um,
I mean, Aguilar has become, one of the premier new amplifier, bass amplification, and now also bass pickups and
right,
all sorts of preamps and effect pedals, and has become one of the premier companies that puts out high quality, what I call new school
right,
product, right? Because it is different. It's not based on the tube um, idea, not on based on tubes versus transistors anymore.
sure,
It's hybrid, right? It's lightweight.
sure.
It definitely is, an example for what I call the new wave of engineering and bass sound, right?
Well, it's funny. We do well. When I owned the company, we certainly did a lot of hybrid stuff.
Right,
But when me and Alex started out, we focused on tube gear,
right,
on a tube signal path,
right.
and uh, not because we had an engineering perspective that we had to take,
Mm.
but this is where my experience as a bass player kind of came in.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that as a bass player, the most glorious thing you can ever capture is not your frequency response,
Mm.
but your dynamic range.
That's true. Yeah,
And, as an upright player,
yeah,
how much harmonic content is on the attack of a note,
yeah,
and how the note goes through the overtone series, how quickly it dies off, how long it stays on the fundamental.
yeah.
And these all happen at volumes. There's no frequency that happens without being at a relative volume.
Right.
And we were particularly enamored with how tubes affect the overtone series, and they, obviously emphasize the even overtones.
Right.
But I think over the years, we learned with Alex, and Alex left the company in 2004.
Right.
I continued on by myself with different engineers that we hired. Uh, but the goal was always about what technology can we use to accomplish a musical goal.
Right.
And, of course, what do bass players want? We weren't the first company to make lightweight heads.
Right. Right.
We may have been the last company to make lightweight head,
Oh wow.
but but we always kind of thought about the musical consequences first, and that's the way I love to do it,
Yeah.
and 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 that's the way musical gear has to be made, in my opinion. You can, let's say you had a portable upright. It's a beautiful thing if it's portable,
Yeah.
but if it sounds bad,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
gonna not be so enamored.
Exactly. No, it's that makes so much sense what you're saying, because that whole, it really speaks to the combination of being a musician and branching out in another field, and using like having this cross pollination going on between the two things. Because it reminds me a lot of a conversation I had with a drummer, Ulysses Owens Jr., and he pointed out that, listen, as musicians, we are already multitaskers anyway. Like
Yeah.
that's what we need to do. If you're a good musician, you cannot just focus on playing your instrument. Your focus needs to be everywhere, right? And all of that comes into play. Like you need to be able to hear what the guitar is doing, what
Sure.
the
Sure.
singer is doing. You need to be able to react to all of that
Sure.
while holding down your
Sure.
chair. So all of these tasks, all of these possibilities, kind of, you take all of that, put it into another form of interest, another business form, be it,
Sure.
vintage rental, or then I need an amp that works in the studio just as well as my other gear, right? So let
Right.
me design my own amp, right?
Right.
It all comes together, with the beginning of, with keeping in mind that you were open to seeing yourself, even though at first you weren't open to see yourself multifaceted, but then you did see yourself as such, right?
I did. I did. I
Yeah.
did eventually.
Yeah.
I was not a young man by the time that happened, but thank God I did. But
Yeah.
um, I also like to say something that I think is important
Go for it. Go for it.
because uh, since we live in this kind of flat world with the collapse of the record companies, dog is crying still.
No, that's
Can we,
okay.
I think we may just have to ignore him.
Yeah.
Mike, come here. Come on. You could be on. This
You,
is.
you
You
can
could
be
be on
on the
this
follow up.
podcast.
Come on.
So that. So I've done stuff at different colleges where we talk about how to live a musical life,
Right.
and I think the point that we're making here is that living a musical life doesn't necessarily mean you're always playing music every minute of the day.
That's correct.
But being a musician informs who you are, it
Yeah.
informs your personality. It's
Yeah.
part of the essence of your soul. And uh, it can kind of go everywhere.
Right.
It can go into anything that you're doing. In my case, it was very specific that as a bass player,
Yeah.
I decided to make bass gear.
Right.
That's almost a little too obvious.
Yeah. It's-
But it doesn't have to be that obvious,
right.
as you know from all the things that you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I found that in some colleges, uh, they say, okay, in the flat world, every musician has to be a marketeer, a
Mm.
self promoter. And I read one book where the guy was saying, uh, here's what a 401k is. You have to be able to do your taxes
Mm.
because I guess the idea is that there's no industry to support us anymore.
Right.
Um, but the funny thing is that even though I'm saying to use all your aptitudes,
Right.
I would say that the other part of what I would have learned in my journey is always collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I certainly could have never formed Aguilar Amplification without Alex Aguilar. I
Right.
couldn't have continued to grow it without any number of different engineers, associates, um, industry support. Um,
And that
don't
includes
do it.
it
You don't do it.
includes like accountants, that includes like bank
Yeah,
managers,
yeah.
all of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
be your own lawyer.
Yeah.
Don't be it unless you really want to make a website.
Right.
Don't be your own webmaster.
Right. Right.
Find somebody that you can speak to and collaborate. And by collaborate, that you really understand each other
Yeah.
and really can support each other and help each other.
Yeah.
And that, uh, I think, is a mistake that some of these music colleges are saying because musicians coming out of school are kind of going, well, if I can't get an orchestra job,
Mm.
what will I do?
Right.
And uh, well, you should know your own aptitudes because it might be that you're the person who's going to, uh, be the road manager. I
Right.
mean, there's support personnel for everything.
Yeah.
any number of different jobs, but you don't have to take on work that is not part of your aptitude because we live in this kind of collapsed industry.
Right, right, right.
Does that make any sense what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
no, it makes a lot of sense. It in essence, what you're describing is that, yes, on the one hand, understand that you have multiple amplitudes, right?
Yeah,
That you are
yeah,
a multifaceted being, and therefore you have multiple interests, and you're good at a number of things, right?
yeah.
Figure out what they are, and with
It's not
that
going to be
comes.
everything.
Exactly. It's not going to be everything. Because with
Yeah,
figuring out what you're good at also comes figuring out what you're not good at.
right.
With those parts, reach out and collaborate. Work with
Yes,
the people who are good at those things, right?
right,
And open yourself up to being able to identifying collaborators, right?
right.
I'm always like I briefly told you, like I went into real estate, right? And
Yep.
I will stay in real estate. I've always been in it. My family has always been in it. It's been something that I grew up with, or the understanding of with which I grew up with, right?
Mm,
Um, one thing that I like to do as a landlord or as a homeowner is build my team, what I call building my team, meaning find a good plumber, find a
right.
good contractor, find a good real estate lawyer, right? Find a good accountant, right? Building my team is even though I have skills, I've been a construction worker for many years.
Mm.
I have skills in the construction field. I can do a lot of stuff myself. Nevertheless, do I have the time? Do I really want to do that? Is it prudent of me
Does it
to
make you, and does it make you happy to do it?
does it make me happy to do it?
You know, uh,
So part of this is finding your team, and I think this is
yeah,
what you're talking to in terms of collaborating, right?
right.
Is find the people where I can delegate stuff to them, right? And with that, we can still move in the same direction. We can still move into, I can move as a musician and I can move as a landlord at the same
Yeah,
time, because I was able to collaborate with my team over here and make sure that everything is on the up and up, right? So just to explain this to the audience, and I hope that kind of sums it up.
hmm,
Awesome. So let me the other thing that the panel sort of was based on was, and we have touched on that to a certain degree already, but I also just want to reinforce that, was that our entire business has changed, our
yes,
industry has changed.
hmm,
You could say it's done a 180, a
yeah,
360, whatever, right? uh, wouldn't it behoove us as musicians to change with it, right?
right.
Or at least be part of that
Mm,
change. um, as I said, you already kind of touched on it, because on the one hand, there used to be the school model that, okay, you learn an instrument and that's what you do.
right.
Period. End of story. It seems that nowadays that school model has changed. But let me ask you, what's your opinion, or what's your insight? What the change in the industry is concerned, and the consequent change of how musicians define themselves.
Well, we had a. To me, what's fascinating is the history of the 20th century in music.
Right.
The century started out, any musician that needed to make money for real had owned publishing,
Right.
and publishing sheet music was the way people spread music. There wasn't a
Mhm.
recorded music industry.
Right.
And music was very participatory.
Right.
So if you were wealthy enough to have a piano in the house, you'd get the sheet music, which would enrich whoever published it, hopefully a songwriter,
Right.
and you'd bring it into your home
Right.
and you'd learn it. If you weren't so wealthy, you might have had a guitar.
Right.
I don't know, go down the thing. Maybe you had a harmonica at some point. But the point of it is that people made music,
Right.
and listening to music was a more of a rare event outside the family. Maybe you went to the town hall, or
Right.
maybe you went to a speakeasy to hear somebody perform.
Right.
But you were still hearing live musicians, or you were the live musician.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those things definitely didn't come with riches.
Right.
But I think when the music industry, that we call it the music industry, to me it's the record industry.
Right.
And when it blew up, uh, musicians and myself included, we all thought that the value was the intellectual property of the song,
Right.
which it is.
Right.
But what drove the record industry was the sale of the physical product.
Wow.
So, the sale of vinyl,
Right.
God help it, the sale of cassettes. I try to
Yeah.
forget that, but, you
Yeah.
know, obviously the huge
Right.
profit in making CDs,
Right.
and all this stuff was exploiting catalog, exploiting musicians largely.
Right.
Obviously, some musicians made bank on everything,
Right.
and the amount of money that was being made by the large companies was just amazing.
Right.
And that's what we think of as the record industry. And even a jazz musician selling 10,000 copies could turn around and have $100,000 in his pocket, assuming he wasn't being short paid by somebody.
Right. Right.
Um, so now that the delivery system no longer exists, there's no physical product.
Right.
It's just water without the bottle.
Right.
We all need it to survive,
Yeah.
but you were buying the bottle,
Right.
you were buying the format. So we're in the same position now where owners of publishing have some income.
Mm.
But the intellectual property that we sold physically, that's
Right.
we were making money selling pieces of plastic.
Right.
So what does that mean? Well, in the pandemic, I don't know how many people know this, but some of the biggest vendors, the big chain stores, Sweetwater, a huge, terrific vendor, had the best years ever. Fender had the best year last year that they ever had,
Mm.
ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is because to some we're going back to where if you want music, you kind of go, maybe I will play the saxophone. I've always thought it sounded great, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, the amount of home recording stuff. Maybe I will write songs and record them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that music has become and will continue to be more of a participatory experience,
Right.
which I think is largely good
Yeah.
for people
Right.
to
Of course.
participate in making music at whatever level they make it in.
Yeah.
And clearly they'll go see more live music.
Yeah.
Uh, and because there is no current way to monetize a recording,
Right.
there just isn't.
Right.
Um, so that does leave open the question that if you thought you were going to sell records to make bank,
Mm.
what do you do? Which
Hey,
brings us to
to this subject. Yeah. Yeah.
to this subject
Yeah.
of living a musical life,
Right.
finding a context for yourself, being open to diversification,
Yeah.
uh, and and seeing what you can decide not to be afraid of.
Right. Right. That's so deep. That is so deep. Absolutely. You have to open yourself up. You have to decide what can you not be afraid of. Exactly. That's I could not have put it in a better way.
Well,
that, that
I,
makes
I
so
feel
much
ex-
sense.
I feel extremely philosophical this
Yeah.
morning, this afternoon.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, listen, Dave Boonshoft, I mean, I think this is the perfect way to kind of cap this, because that is such good insight. Now, just to let the audience know, how did the story of Aguilar continue, or how is it continuing?
Well, I sold the company to Core USA
Yeah,
at the end of last year, and they own the company now.
yeah.
And I wish them all the best luck, and I hope they continue to make great products and do right by the Aguilar name. And
Are you still involved in one way or another?
I consult a little bit.
Okay,
I
okay,
consult a little bit,
okay.
but largely I'm sitting on my butt, and kind of we're living out here in Westchester now, so uh, they have bugs out here. They're
I,
really big bugs. Like we
I
don't
had
have,
no idea.
it's amazing. So like today, I spent the day working with the exterminator to. They have bees that take grass around, and I don't know. So
Who
I'm
knew?
chilling. I'm chilling for a while, but
Right,
uh, we built a music room. I'm playing a lot of music.
right,
Uh, uh, all the kids, my kids and my wife's kids, they all play music.
right.
So I think that I'm personally back into music as a participatory
Yeah,
uh, uh, experience. So
right.
uh, I'm enjoying playing music, relaxing. Um,
As you
who knows?
should.
Who knows? Who knows what'll be the next opportunity or the next change?
Right, 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 right. No, and as you should, because I mean the product, speaks for itself, and has, and I, speaking from my experience, has just enriched and made a lot of things possible that would not have been possible any other
Right,
way. Be it the lightweight, be it the sound, the volume,
right.
whatever you want to call, or whatever you want to put into that category, right?
Sure.
So listen, Dave Boonshoft, I can't thank you enough. This was a great conversation. Any parting words that come to your mind?
No, just wishing everybody who's listened to this that it's been some value. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Oh, my
I really
pleasure.
appreciate the opportunity, and that everybody uh, be happy, live a musical life if that's what you want to do, and have a great journey.
Excellent. Well, listen, Dave Boonshoff, stay safe out there, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll see each other in person again. It looks like
That would
we're
be terrific.
we're moving in that direction. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.